In the history of combat, victory is rarely decided by the strength of the arm. It is decided in the inches between the mind and the blade. It is April 14th, 1612. On a lonely island in the Shimonoseki Strait, two men are about to meet. One is the demon of the western provinces, armed with a legendary longsword. The other is a dirty, unkempt ronin who arrived late, wielding nothing but a piece of wood carved from a spare oar. Sasaki Kojiro draws his sword and throws his scabbard into the sea. His opponent smiles and speaks his first words. "Kojiro, you have already lost. If you intended to win, you would have need of your scabbard." Within seconds, the duel is over. One strike, one death, and the birth of a legend that would never know defeat. This is the story of Miyamoto Musashi, a man who fought 60 duels to the death and survived them all. Today, we unearth the archives of the Sword Saint. Musashi was born into a world of blood. In 1600, at just 17 years old, he stood on the losing side of the Battle of Sekigahara, the most violent conflict in Japanese history. He survived the slaughter, but he emerged as a man without a master, a ghost in a new era of peace. While others sought comfort, Musashi sought the way. He realized that to truly master the blade, he had to master himself. He became a shugyosha, a wandering pilgrim on a quest for self-perfection. He stopped bathing, stopped brushing his hair, and stopped caring for the comforts of the flesh. His life became a laboratory for human performance. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a pioneer of mental optimization. He understood that a warrior's greatest enemy isn't the man standing across from him, it's the hesitation in his own heart. Musashi's record of 60-0 wasn't a result of luck. It was the result of a revolutionary approach to strategy. He developed the Niten Ichi Ryu, the style of two swords. While every other school in Japan taught the traditional two-handed grip, Musashi fought with a katana in one hand and a wakizashi in the other. He broke the rules to rewrite them. But his real weapon was psychology. Musashi was a master of the pre-fight game. He would arrive hours late to irritate his opponents, or hours early to hide in the shadows. He would study his enemies' habits, their breathing, and their fears. He famously stated, "Under the sword lifted high, there is hell making you tremble, but go ahead, and you have the land of bliss." He viewed combat as a science of timing and rhythm. If he could break his opponent's rhythm, he had already won the fight before the first strike was even thrown. Perhaps his most controversial legend is the extermination of the Yoshioka school. After defeating the two masters of the clan, the remaining students sought revenge. They gathered dozens of archers and swordsmen to ambush Musashi at the Ichijo-ji pine tree. It was supposed to be an execution, not a duel. Instead of running, Musashi attacked. He moved through the crowd like a whirlwind of steel, striking down the clan's young leader and cutting a path through his supporters. He didn't fight them as a group, he fought them as a series of individual duels, positioning himself so that his enemies blocked each other. That night, the most prestigious fencing school in Kyoto was erased by a single man. It was here that Japan realized Musashi wasn't just a swordsman, he was a force of nature. As Musashi aged, the blood on his hands began to weigh differently. He realized that the way of the sword was identical to the way of the artist. He took up painting, calligraphy, and tea ceremonies. He discovered that the same focus required to kill a man was required to create a masterpiece. He was biohacking his own brain centuries before the term existed, using art to find a level of calm that no battle could provide. He retreated to the mountains, to a cave known as Reigando. There, he sat in silence to record his ultimate findings. He knew he was dying, and he had one final duty: to leave a map for those who would follow his path. He began to write the Go-Rin no Sho, the Book of 5 Rings. To Musashi, the ultimate level of combat was not a technique, it was a state of being. He called it the void. This wasn't a philosophy of nothingness, but a philosophy of total presence. In the Scroll of the Void, he describes a mind so clear that it reacts to an attack before the conscious thought of danger even registers. In modern terms, Musashi was chasing the flow state. He believed that through relentless discipline, a warrior could remove the lag between perception and action. He practiced a form of ancient biohacking, training his nervous system to stay calm under the ultimate stress of a deathmatch. He taught that by knowing things that exist, you can know that which does not exist. For Musashi, the void was the space where the elite outperformed the average, not through more effort, but through zero hesitation. Musashi's strategy was built on two contrasting elements, earth and water. The earth represents the foundation, your stance, your grip, and your non-negotiable grit. It is the tactical base that allows you to remain unshakable. But the earth is useless without the fluidity of water. He taught his students to be water-like in their spirit. Water adapts to the shape of the vessel. It can flow or it can crash. Musashi used this to dismantle his opponent's expectations. If they were aggressive, he became a vacuum. If they were defensive, he became an overwhelming tide. He viewed every duel as a high-stakes strategy game, where the first player to lose their form was the first to lose their life. It wasn't about the better sword, it was about the better logic. Musashi's strategy was built on two contrasting elements, earth and water. The earth represents the foundation, your stance, your grip, and your non-negotiable grit. It is the tactical base that allows you to remain unshakable. But the earth is useless without the fluidity of water. He taught his students to be water-like in their spirit. Water adapts to the shape of the vessel. It can flow or it can crash. Musashi used this to dismantle his opponent's expectations. If they were aggressive, he became a vacuum. If they were defensive, he became an overwhelming tide. He viewed every duel as a high-stakes strategy game, where the first player to lose their form was the first to lose their life. It wasn't about the better sword, it was about the better logic. Musashi was an early pioneer of what we now call sports science and metabolic health. He didn't view training as something you did for an hour a day. He viewed every waking moment as a form of training. He lived a life of extreme, austere discipline, optimizing his environment to keep his senses sharp. He advocated for perceiving that which cannot be seen with the eye. This meant developing a peripheral awareness that modern athletes spend thousands of dollars trying to achieve with technology. By stripping away the distractions of 17th century luxury, Musashi turned his body into a finely tuned instrument. He understood that a warrior's physical output was directly linked to his internal state, his breath, his nutrition, and his mental clarity. He didn't just fight his enemies, he outlived and outprepared them. The Scroll of Fire is Musashi's guide to the heat of the moment. Here, he discusses the physics of timing. He identified three types of initiative: attacking before the enemy, attacking simultaneously, and attacking after they have committed. But his most dangerous tactic was psychological warfare. Musashi loved to frighten his enemies, not with screams, but with silence and unexpected rhythms. He would move slowly when they expected speed and strike with the fire of a mountain when they expected a retreat. He mastered the art of the infection, where he would force his opponent to adopt his own agitated rhythm, leading them into a trap. In The Fire, Musashi explains that victory is a mental collapse that happens long before the physical body falls. He taught that you must become the enemy to understand their fear, and then use that fear to end the conflict. In 1643, the man who had survived 60 duels and countless battles walked away from the courts of lords and the honors of men. He retreated to the Reigandor cave, the cave of Spirit Rock. He didn't go there to die, he went there to finish his work. For Musashi, life was a continuous training camp, and the cave was his final arena. Alone in the silence, he stripped away everything that wasn't essential. He looked back at his life not as a collection of kills, but as a map of human potential. He realized that the same discipline he used to win on the battlefield was the key to conquering the internal chaos of the human mind. In these final years, the Sword Saint became something more, a scientist of the soul. Just weeks before his death, Musashi wrote the Dokudo, the Path of Self-Reliance. It is a list of 21 precepts that serve as a brutal manifesto for anyone seeking peak performance. He wrote, "Accept everything just as it is. Do not seek pleasure for its own sake. Never be jealous." This wasn't just ancient wisdom, it was a psychological framework for resilience. Musashi understood that to be truly undefeated, one must be independent of external validation and internal desires. He was teaching us to become the masters of our own destiny, to build a mind like water that cannot be shaken by the storms of life. It is the ultimate guide for the modern warrior navigating a world of distractions. Musashi's life was a masterclass in what we now call biohacking and sports science. He maintained his peak physical and mental output until his final breath at age 61. He didn't just survive, he transcended the limitations of the human body through sheer force of will and optimized habit. When he finally laid down his brush and his blades on June 13, 1645, he died as he had lived, sitting upright, one hand holding his sword, the other his brush. He didn't fear death because he had already died to his ego years before. He left behind a legacy that is more than just history. It is a blueprint for excellence. He proved that whether you are on a wrestling mat, in a boardroom, or facing the challenges of daily life, the principles of strategy remain the same. Focus, adapt, and never stop training. Miyamoto Musashi was a man of the sword, but his true masterpiece was himself. He unearths a truth we often forget, that the way is in everything. Through 60 duels, he never found an opponent as formidable as his own weaknesses, and by conquering those, he became eternal. The archives for today are closed, but the path remains open. The question isn't whether you can fight like Musashi, but whether you can live with his relentless pursuit of mastery. What is your way, and are you brave enough to follow it to the end? This was Legend Archives. If you found value in this journey through the dust of time, subscribe and join our next expedition into the heart of history. Until then, stay sharp, stay focused, and keep unearthing your own legend.